Hi, and welcome to Session 7, Caribbean Reefs. The Caribbean is home to 10% of the world's coral reefs, which are both ecological treasures and pillars of local economies. Yet these ecosystems are at the front line of climate change, facing bleaching, storm impacts, and new coral diseases, while nearshore areas are increasingly affected by the massive influx of sargassum.
This session brings together students and researchers active in the region to share perspective and case study on reef science and monitoring in Costa Rica,
environmental communication and awareness strategies from Curaçao and Colombia,
the sargassum crisis in the Caribbean, causes, consequences, and management responses,
and active restoration techniques, for example, coral nurseries, larval propagation, and community engagement.
And so we are lucky to have a nice panel also with us. Before we just present them to you also, as always, if you're active, you're live with us on YouTube, do not hesitate to ask any question. If you want to the panel, we'll be glad to ask them. So with us today, we have Olivia Guberman. She's a MarWorld alumni, communication manager, former from Blue Islands, but she's also done a professional project when she was at MarWorld with a branch foundation in Curaçao.
All the way from Costa Rica, we have Juan Jose Alvarado, who's works at University of Costa Rica.
Along him, Cindy Fernandez Garcia, also a researcher at University of Costa Rica.
We have MarWorld student Alexandra Rubin in Colombia.
And she's not present, but we have also a MarWorld student currently doing her internship at the University of Costa Rica, who shared a little video because she's on the field right now, and we're going to be really happy to discover her work.
Hi, this is me. My name is Emily Hamilton, and I'm a master's student at the Université Côte d'Azur. But currently, I'm in an internship at the University of Costa Rica in San Jose, where I work in LICAN, or the Laboratory of Neotropical Reef Ecology and Conservation. LICAN works a lot on the Pacific side of Costa Rica and Bahia Culebra Guanacaste, where they not only monitor the reef ecosystems, but are dedicated to coral restoration, including a reef gardening program. The coral restoration projects are made possible through partnerships with local organizations and follow different scientific and experimental approaches. This is where my project comes in, which is the characterization of the microbiome of Pasillopora, the main coral in the reef gardening program. The coral microbiome is a diverse community of microbes, which includes bacteria, archaea, viruses, fungi, and protists, and play an important role in coral health. However, it remains less well characterized, as its composition varies with numerous factors. LICAN has developed this project in hopes of developing a deeper understanding of how microbiomes impact coral health, resilience, and ability to withstand environmental stressors.
Great. So that was a little update from Emily, who sadly can't be here at the moment, but we do have her supervisor, Juan Jose. So we'd like to start with you, if that's okay. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and research experience in the Caribbean?
Hi. First, thank you for the invitation, and I'm really glad to be here and share with you all this information and our passion for the sea. I'm a marine biologist. I did my studies at the University of Costa Rica a long time ago. Then I moved to Mexico to do a PhD, and I returned almost 15 years ago to Costa Rica to start my lab, working on the monitoring and restoration initiatives in coral reef ecosystems on the Caribbean and on the Pacific side of my country. Also working in collaboration with some other countries in Central America, Mexico, and Colombia too.
Very nice. Can you, obviously research in the Caribbean, it's a huge area. I think sometimes in Europe, we forget how big of an area this is we're talking about. So what are some of the main threats facing coral reefs from the area working in?
The thing about the Caribbean is that even this, it looks like a small piece of the whole world of coral reef around the world, but in such a small piece of the planet, you have a huge diversity of kinds of corals, of fishes, of invertebrates, and also has a very old geological history about the formation of the Caribbean and its relationship between the Mediterranean and the Pacific and the closure of the Isthmus of Panama. So it has a very interesting, how you say, history, ecological history. The major threat is also because this sea is almost close. It's not so close because it has all those islands, yeah, but it's surrounded by the lesser and the greater Antilles. So there is a circulation that retains most of the water inside of the Caribbean. So any threats that happens, for example, in Florida, will impact Colombia. Any threat that happens in República Dominicana will impact Belize, but it moves really, really fast. So, and also another threat is that we are so in the middle of the Canal of Panama. So any disease that comes from the Indo-Pacific and comes to the Canal of Panama will get into the Caribbean seas really, really easy. And that happens in the past, in the 80s, for example, with the disease of a small sea urchin that was really, really important on the Caribbean. And almost the whole population that sea urchin disappears in less than a year. And with the impact of that disappearance, a change in the composition of the substrata from corals to macroalgae. And then you have a huge amount of population living very close to the sea, with not all the levels of how you say to treat the waters, and so there is a lot of pollution coming from those cities directly to the sea. So again, there's a lot of circulation, and all that pollution moves around that area. But it's also quite interesting to see that even with all that kind of threats that we have, we still have some really interesting places with really high diversity, really, really high resiliency against all those impacts.
Thank you very much. It's a good overview of the Caribbean. It sounds like a very sensitive system that we really need to pay attention to. So we'll move on to Olivia now. Oh, yeah, to Olivia. And maybe you could give us a little bit of background, maybe to where you are, first of all, and your research experience.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us here. I'm Olivia. I'm originally from Switzerland. I'm currently in Indonesia, but I will be talking about the Caribbean today. I'm doing a conservation dive master at the moment, and I was in Curaçao in the Caribbean for my professional project while I was a master student at MarWorld. And I worked for a coral restoration NGO called Branch Coral Foundation. And I did mainly focus on communication and education during my time there, because Branch was a very young NGO just starting out. So I was helping them to build out the whole foundation, like a communication strategy, and also implementing some first channels and outreach campaigns, but also testing out some different approaches for the communications. I'll be happy to talk about that, how to best reach people.
Just to jump in, just not to cut you, Olivia, but we have so currently a Blue Manager student also in Branch who took over your work, and she's going to speak also in the session about education and communication and outreach. So yeah, we will learn a little bit more, I guess, also insight into your work at that moment.
Indeed, yeah, it's great that so many MarWorld students are now connected to this organization. That's fantastic.
That's really good. What were some of the challenges you faced when it comes to restoration?
So one challenge was, first of all, more like logistical and in terms of collaborations with stakeholders. So for example, in Curaçao, one of the initial challenges was even getting the permit to start doing restoration. It's a very complex, also with the government to really get the permit to start the work. And then once you had that, another challenge was also because when you do the restoration, it's fantastic, but Curaçao also has a lot of stressors, a lot of local stressors, and if those are not eliminated, the restoration efforts might not be as successful. So, for example, there is a lot of land-based pollution, or the whole sewage that goes directly into the ocean as well. a lot of tourism, of course, and that all of these factors, they are stressors for the coral reefs. So it was kind of logistical challenges, but then also the local stressors on the coral reefs that we were trying to mitigate.
Cool. Well, I guess we can perhaps just continue first, perhaps on corals, and go to Alexandra, to Ali. I think you're currently in Colombia. Can you give us more insight about your experience there?
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for having me. I'm not currently in Colombia. I got back to Europe on Sunday, but close almost. But yeah, my project. So a little background on me, I suppose. I'm a MARA's student in my second year, working on my master's thesis now. And my project is focused in Colombia, and we're studying kind of like how Juan was telling us a little bit earlier, that there's a lot of this, the ecosystem in the Caribbean is very closed. And so whatever impacts Florida will eventually impact Colombia, like he said. And that's exactly what's happening. So there is a disease that's going through the Caribbean right now. It's called stony coral tissue loss disease. And it started in Florida and unfortunately has made its way through the Caribbean and is now affecting the corals on an island that's actually closer to Costa Rica, but it is part of Colombia. So I have been studying some of these impacts of the disease on the coral coverage in a few different locations on the island. Here I can share my screen really quickly and show you kind of a bit of what it looks like, if that's easy. I've been using a program, and so what we do is we take these photo mosaics of the reef, and I put it into this software. It kind of looks a bit like this. And then what I do is we kind of draw over the coral and assign it its species. And then I overlay these like little colorful bits on months afterward. And then I adjust the coral coverage. And so you can kind of see how it's changing. And so here's a photo of the disease. This white part in the middle is the disease, and it will probably inevitably affect this whole coral. Unfortunately, it's pretty aggressive, the disease itself. And yeah, and a little bit in addition to the just looking at the corals and how it's been affected by the disease throughout the months. I've also been doing a bit of social science, which was really interesting, and talking to local stakeholders on the island, from fishermen, NGO, government, the locals themselves, and tourists, to kind of see not just focusing on what's going on in the ocean, but also what's going on with the people and how it's all interconnected. So yeah, it's been pretty interesting.
And was that software TagLab you were using, I guess?
It is indeed.
Wow, amazing. But I have a question on that. Are you tracking the same corals over time?
Yeah, so I'm looking at a few different sites, the same sites, from July 2023 to March of 2025, with every few months. So the exact same corals over time. I'm looking at a bit of the preliminary results. It shows about 70% coral loss. So pretty frustrating and sad, but yeah, that's what we're seeing.
Very cool.
Okay, well, I guess we can move now to you, Cindy. So more on perhaps on the microalgae aspect, but you can talk about like the sargassum crisis also in the Caribbean region, which is something quite a huge topic. So I'll leave you the floor.
Sure. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm going to show you some pictures. We have here.
Just time perhaps for them to load.
Yeah. Okay. Do you see the
Yeah, we got it.
Okay. So we have a sargassum in the Caribbean. We have benthic sargassum, and also we have a floating sargassum. This is a very natural. They are very natural species, and this ecosystem of floating sargassum is very important because it has a lot of organisms that depend on this habitat. But what is happening now is that we have a big bloom of sargassum sea that is completely natural, but there is a massive floating sargassum in the South Atlantic of the world. And this floating mass is going into the rest of the Caribbean, and it's affecting a lot of coral reefs, seagrass beds, and communities. What we are looking in the Caribbean, this is a picture from Costa Rica. This is the beach, and this is floating sargassum in the water. And what we have is that this a lot of biomass that is getting into the coast, and also we have sargassum that is in the base of the coral reefs. So that is dead sargassum that is there in the base of the reef. And we have a lot of problems in this. What we are doing is we have like a citizen science program where people is telling us where is the sargassum in Central America. We have monitoring people that is monitoring in Honduras, in Nicaragua, and in Costa Rica, and also we have been joining people from Panama for this big project.
Thank you very much. It sounds obviously a major threat for the Caribbean reefs, but super interesting too. Sticking with you, Cindy, I have a question on the last point you had about regional cooperation. What is the kind of regional cooperation map like in this area of the world?
What we do is that we have an application. It's called EpiCollect. It's a free application, and we have a project there that is called Monitoreo de Sargassum. It's monitoring of sargassum, and people can join this project in this free app, and people can take pictures and send us information about where is the sargassum, how much is coming into the beach, and when it's coming, and which species are getting into the beach. So it's a huge regional program that we are trying to explore, and it is important that people is getting in contact to us, because we cannot go into the places very fast, and it's a fast way where people can help us, letting know us where is how much and when it's coming.
Very good.
Yeah. But I guess when we're talking about local people also, you talk
Local
about it,
people,
Ali,
yes.
but yeah, I will talk also, I think I will go back to Ali and then to Olivia, because Ali, you said you've done this social part also. So it could be interesting to have your point of view about what was going on and how you felt the people were involved in Colombia. And then after we can go perhaps to Olivia and going back to Curaçao.
Yeah, it was really interesting. There's a lot of finger pointing and blame pointing, and not a lot of introspection. But yeah, I think it's really interesting how the different groups see each other and how they're working together, and how the fishermen feel like maybe they're undervalued by the government, and how the government feels, how the fishermen aren't cooperating with them. And it's really, really interesting. And there's a lot of, cultural aspects to play or at play as well. One of the main through points that I did find was that there was a consensus that there is a big lack of education on the island, and almost everybody from any stakeholder group agreed that there needs to be a bit more education of the children, and that it should just be more part of their curriculum, because the island's it's really small. It takes about an hour to go from the whole island. And so the locals were really saying that it should really be a part of their curriculum in school to learn about their island, what makes it so special, all the ecosystems that are around it, and that they're just really not taught so much about the corals that are even there surrounding them, the mangroves that they have and stuff. So that was really interesting to hear. At least one consensus from all stakeholder groups is that there should be a bit more education. But yeah, it was really, really interesting experience to talk to all of them.
Cool. What about you, Olivia?
Yeah, maybe I can, for this question, also share my screen real quick to show a video, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Just quickly share my screen, because I think this fits really well also what I saw in, I hope you can see my screen. And I turn off the sound. So this is, for example, a snorkeling tour that Branch Coral Foundation did with students, with college students, with 90 kids actually, and they snorkeled in one of the coral nurseries. They had an educational session beforehand, and then they went to the nursery with the coral fragments, but also to the outplanting site. And for many of them, it was also maybe the first time snorkeling, the first time seeing the underwater world. And I think that's was a very important thing that Branch was doing, not only the active restoration, but the whole outreach part. So, for example, going to the local schools regularly to teach kids about the importance of coral reefs and, for example, which fish are okay to eat, which ones maybe are vulnerable or threatened, and then also why we need to protect coral reefs and getting them excited about marine conservation. So I think this I'm just going to stop sharing the screen again. Yeah, I think this was one of the biggest takeaways for me, that actually going to the schools, taking people into the field, taking them maybe on snorkeling tours or on dives, coral restoration dives, that makes people excited and makes people care. And yeah, this creates this emotional connection for people to then really want to change something. And also, for example, the government, we even brought for example, the minister there to cut a coral fragment or to plant the first fragment into the tree. And that way we could get the support more easily of all the stakeholders. So yeah, I think it's the education and the outreach is just as important as the active restoration itself.
I think that's kind of a running theme in all of our sessions, stakeholder engagement as well, which is something we don't usually speak about a lot. But one thing that we do speak about, which is extremely important, including stakeholder engagement, is climate change. So obviously climate change in the region is having, extremely disastrous effects. And I'd like to come to Juan on this. Emily in her video mentioned that Bacillopora is the dominant species there, main species of coral, or one of them. What's the effect of climate change on this particular species, and what have you seen in the region?
Okay, yeah. In the case of the Pacific side of Costa Rica, the thing is that the coral reef are built by just one species, are monospecific. So everything depends on that species. So if that one disappears or their coral cover diminish a lot, everything gets threatened by their absence. No, the fishes, the invertebrates, and also the people that depends on their economy on coral reef. No, for example, tourists or fisheries. So the threat related to climate change is huge, because now even on the Caribbean, the patches of the coral reef are getting more patchy and patchy. In depends on the areas, and the species that are stand up against the climate change are few and maybe more resilient, but flatter, not as how you say, complex as in the past, in the 80s, for example. So everything is going to be changing and changing. So the dependency of the diversity from the structure of the reef is going to diminish, but also the economy from the people. And I think that is key. Everything that the whole panel has mentioned about education, because with the education, we can change all of this. It's the key of trying to change the point of view of the people, of the stakeholders, of the scientists, and then of the next generation, and mostly from this generation. That's the point where we need to change. Yeah, more or less. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's super insightful from that part of the world. Yeah.
I guess I could have perhaps the last one, because we are running already out of time. It's going really fast. No, but it's more perhaps general overview also, because as we know, we're doing also this event trying to link into UNOC, to the SDGs. And it's true that we talk about also a lot about the conserve at least 30% of coastal and marine areas. So I was just wondering if you can briefly perhaps give an overview, because we talk about restoration, to stakeholders and engagement. Like, how do you feel it's going in the Caribbean region at your different place? So I don't know who wants to start.
Maybe
Cindy.
Cindy.
Yeah.
Well, there are many things that are happening now. People is getting in chains of doing research, doing recollection of garbage and these kind of things. But what we have to do is what we have to realize is that the sea is presenting these symptoms. For example, sargassum is a symptom from a sea that is in danger, that is getting nutrients. For example, these algae are a symptom of nutrients in the world. So we have to make very we have to be very pushy into the authorities and to the decision makers to change things in a global world. So I think many of the people now in the communities, the scientific areas, are trying to make those impacts in the decision makers.
Thank you very much. Maybe Ali?
Yeah, so the area that I have been doing my study in is actually a biosphere reserve. It's a marine protected area. But after speaking to many people, including the government entity that is in charge of the marine protected area, it's really apparent that there's a massive lack of funding. So they are, I don't know off the top of my head how large the protected area is, but they only have one boat to patrol it. So the fishermen know that, the dive operators know that, and the government knows that there's not really any enforcement going on. It's really kind of a protected area on paper. So I would say what's really important kind of going forward with 30 by 30 and all these things to protect the ocean is to just try to make sure that those areas that we already have are well protected. And obviously this is like a humongous issue, but trying to put more financial resources and funding into these entities that we have currently, and then expanding upon them once they already have the capacity and the resources that they need to function, and then kind of going from there. But yeah, that was pretty interesting from the social science.
And Olivia?
Yeah, so specifically for Curaçao, where my project took place, I think that the government is becoming more and more aware, or knows that tourism is becoming the #1 financial kind of income. It didn't used to be the case, but now more and more. So they're more aware that they also need to invest in protecting the marine ecosystem, because diving is a huge kind of sector. And I think especially the neighboring island, Bonaire, which is also a former Dutch colony like Curaçao, is, for example, a really good example of how we could work. It's one of the oldest marine reserves in the world, and it's working quite well. They have several mechanisms, for example, visitors paying an entry fee when they're visiting, and a really good also monitoring, or how do you say, like patrolling mechanism in place. So I think Curaçao can maybe also look a little bit there for ideas. But the government is becoming more and more aware that protecting the local marine ecosystem is important for securing the tourism in the future as well.
Yeah, I think there's a kind of a little bit of a latency on that as well, of people kind of catching up to this as well, and hopefully we still have a chance to kind of capture that too. So we're running out of time, unfortunately. We could go on a long time, but I would like each of you to kind of sum up a main message, a take-home message about Caribbean reefs and future Caribbean reefs, if you could, and for our viewers watching all over the world. Maybe we can come to Juan first.
No, for me, it will be just keep doing the hard work that all the people are doing on the Caribbean. All the countries are sharing the information, and we're going to see the results at the UNOC, because the Global Coral Reef Monitoring Network are going to present the status of the Caribbean on that meeting. And it's a sharing effort, and I think that sharing is the word. If we keep sharing information, sharing knowledge, sharing good practices, we can keep safe the Caribbean reef.
Thank you. Cindy?
Yes, it is important also to make this contacts between each other, also to put in contact communities, because many efforts has been we have been doing many efforts on communities, on tourism, on local children, and we also have to put our forces in education of these new generations. I think this is a point. Because they are going to change this, they can change this, and we have a lot of new and good experiences. And I think to share this and also sharing this with the new generations is part of the of how we can make change.
Thank you. Ali?
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys, what you guys are saying, and building on that, I think that even, I'm there scuba diving and you see so much of it has been affected by this disease, and it can get kind of sad at some points, but there are still corals that survive. There are still corals that are now growing on top of dead corals. Like, there is still hope. Like, these things still are resilient. So yeah, I think that just sharing information, like Juan was saying, and like Cindy's saying, the education and the outreach and all of that, and just, yeah, staying hopeful and doing the good work.
Yeah, well, Nancy Knowlton spoke about we don't need the doom and gloom too much. There is pockets of resilience, so I agree. And to finish, Olivia.
Yeah, I think, again, just involving as many different people, relevant stakeholders and people as possible. Involve the government, the local residents, the tourists, get everyone, kind of give them a means and a way to participate and to become part of this. Because once we are part of something, we feel as part of the solution, and we're not hopeless, we're not all of this doom and gloom, and we start to feel in charge again. And that's what we need, I think.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Of course, stay with us for the next session, which is coming. We're staying in the Caribbean, but this time we will focus a little bit more on Erasmus branch. Again, I want to thank you all for being with us, and yeah.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.